for joining us at Virtual Trade Fair.africa. I'm just so pleased to have Doyle Buehler in. I believe a Canadian based in Perth, Australia. Wrong place to go if you want to learn how to play rugby. You've got to come to Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, and we'll teach you how to pass the ball, Doyle. But in the meantime, second best is you're a digital marketing expert and consultant on an international basis. And you're going to talk to us about a special topic, and I'm going to leave you to that. The floor is yours, Doyle.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and love what you guys are doing. It's been quite the experience to see this kind of grow from the initial stages and then getting it into the actual event as well. So it's fascinating to see. And I mean, some of the conversation was about how do we actually get it to, bigger and better and all that kind of stuff. And that's always possible, but I think we need to look at sort of how do we go from version 1.0 to, version 9 and 10 and that sort of thing. It does take some time. And time is one of the things that I'm going to actually be talking about today. So my name is Doyle Buehler. I run a strategic digital marketing consultancy where we're creating real-time connected and adaptive digital challenger brands in this disruptive digital economy. I'm author of the book on digital strategy called Breakthrough, which takes challenger business on their business-changing digital expedition, what I call it. And I'm your CEO, the Chief Expedition Officer, helping you plan, navigate, and deliver in the digital darkness of online. And I guide digital challenger businesses in navigating the daunting digital economy and overcoming the fear, anxiety, and resistance of operating as a true digital company in the 2020s. I help them to discover, align, and skyrocket their online business and visibility so the world knows who they are and how they do business. All right, so I don't have quite everything here because I was going to, like I said, sketch out, but there's 5 things I want to talk about today. The first one is what I call the inflection point, what it actually means and how it actually works. The second thing I want to talk about is what I call the chaos map, and I'll be able to show you that and how those pieces fit together. The third thing is creating what I call a point of certainty. And then the fourth thing is how we can actually create what I call a process map. One of the steps that we need, one of the building blocks is what is that process that you can actually rely upon to get you through this, get you through crises in general. And then a lot of businesses have been doing as well so far. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is what I call the expedition. So building a team, looking at tactics, strategies, that sort of thing to kind of get you to where you want to go. And that's really what I'm going to be covering today. And I think we're going to have questions at the end. I think that's how we're going to organize things. So in terms of an inflection point, like a lot of what we see today is kind of that downwards movement of the economy and, COVID and all that kind of stuff. But what we actually have here is what's called an inflection point. And what that really does is allow you to say, you know what, there's a downward curve, but you can jump in or jump off this curve at any time. So if we're looking at the typical, recession right here, there's things that we can do. They have to be planned and they have to be very strategic. There's things that we can do that actually can move us forward. And we can decide, hey, when do we want to get off this curve? And how are we going to get off this curve? And that sort of thing. So it's really important to see how can we actually do that and where that point is going to come to us as well. And one of the things that I do have, actually what I will do is I'll do a multimedia presentation, but I wanted to look at how do we actually compare a lot of the differences in terms of what's important now and what we have to do now. So if we're looking at, we can basically do something right now, right? So we're on this curve right here. We can actually decide, oh, well, let's try this, let's try that, let's see how it goes. If we do nothing, where are we on that curve? Well, guess what? We're going to be dropping in terms of looking at 3 months, 6 months, and that sort of thing. The big one from this inflection point is if we actually do something, do strategic, right? This is where we're able to actually make a huge difference in what we're doing and how we're doing it and that sort of thing. And a lot of times marketing is difficult, it is challenging, but if we think about it in advance, then we're usually able to move forward with it. And that's really what I wanted to show you is how can we actually decide these are the pieces that we need, these are the pieces that we need now as well. Does that come up big enough? Do I need to zoom in a bit? Maybe is that a good enough size here?
Yeah,
see if I can zoom in a little bit.
Good.
Is that better?
Yeah, we can expand our own screens. Yep.
Sure. Okay, so this is what I call the chaos map. So right now, if you look at it, we're in this business pain problem paralysis stage right now. And this is what I call zone 1 of fear. And we need to move forward. Let's say, pick a finite length of time in the next 30 days, or we've been doing this, or we're not really sure what to do. We're sort of at the beginning of doing something, and we're not really sure what it's doing or how it can actually work as well. So we want to move from zone 1, which is fear, to zone 2, which is learning, to zone 3, which is growth as well. So it's really important that we understand how do we actually get there? What's important in this journey that we're going to go through? And the first thing that's important is what I call state. I'll actually go through these quickly. There is a lot more depth, but we'll be able to go into a little bit here, but happy to talk about it as well as we get into it. The first one is state, right? We're in a state of chaos. Then we can move into zone 2 of being a state of comprehension, right? So we're understanding things. And then finally, we get to a state of certainty. In terms of the knowledge, what do I need to take with me? A lot of times marketing is about how to. So we can look at it from our marketing in terms of how do people actually interact? How do people move forward? How do people, do something that we're trying to teach them or show them or sell with them or that sort of thing. The next stage we need to look at is moving beyond that, is into that learning stage, is should I, right? So take your customer. First step, how to. We have to be very, very specific that this is how you do something. So if you're showing them something, if you're selling them something, you have to show them how to. Next, you get them to think a little bit further. Should I do this? Should I do that? How can we actually put these pieces together? And then the last stage, the zone 3 down the road, is could I? Right? So this is more the aspirational type stuff. So we don't want to have aspirational marketing right now, because for the most part, it's going to go pretty much over the heads of most of the businesses. They want to get down and do business, and I'm going to show you how they actually do that. Some of the symptoms in zone 1 are marketing fears. We're scared, right? What do I do? Where do I go? Who am I supposed to talk to? What am I selling? How can I fix this? Am I looking at fixing it, fearing it, or failing, right? What do I really have to do to make things work? The next symptoms is, once you're into zone 2, is you're a little bit more relaxed. You're a little bit more understanding. Can you test new things? Can you help them move forward in terms of what's really important and what's not? Test things, test your assumptions. Everything that we've done, up to January is totally different than everything we did before January, February. And we all know that. So we really have to kind of test our assumptions, and we have to know where we are now. And that's super, super important. And then the last one in symptoms is confirming it, right? We need to be able to understand, how do we actually make this work? How do we confirm our assumptions? How do we confirm that our audience is still there? How do we confirm it? So we have to test it, and then we have to confirm it as well. In terms of tools, right now, what do most people need? They need a ladder. They need a life raft. Whatever, analogy you want to call, whatever metaphor you want to use, we need to kind of help them specifically now in terms of getting them up past this specific point in time as well. So call it a ladder, a ladder out of the chasm, or a life raft to the, back to the shore, or whatever the case may be. That's what you have to offer them. Next, what you need to offer them is a roadmap. And this is pretty simple stuff, but the fact is that even 6 months ago, most businesses didn't have a roadmap. Would they survive? Potentially. But today, we really need to sort of dig down and say, this is what's really important. These are the instructions that I need to give my team and my sales and my operations and everything about that. But then if you look further, like, what if we could how do we actually grow this? So we're getting past this. We've, developed the ladder tool. We've helped them create a roadmap, or we've shown them the roadmap that we're giving them with our solution. What comes next? That's a flight plan. And as everybody knows, if you take a map and you fly a plane, right, what do you get? You actually get a flight plan. So we need to be able to map these steps out in terms of what's really important for that customer journey, what's really important for how I deal with the customer, how I, provide that information and knowledge to them as well. So we need to look at it again as a step that we can move forward with them. In terms of strategic, right now, everybody's talking about pivot or shifting or whatever the case may be. Again, it doesn't really matter, but we cannot market the same way that we used to market 6 months ago. If we are, I mean, look, there are going to obviously be exceptions, but if we are, we're not really going to be connecting with our audience because they're going through an awful lot as well as us as also. So we have to decide, how are we going to shift? How are we going to change even just some of the words sometimes, or some of the more sort of fundamental aspects of our product? If you look at Zoom, for example, how did they make that shift? Well, they became very active in terms of marketing to connecting people through video conference. It's been a tool that's been around for, I think 7 or 8 years, for as long as I can remember. I've been using it for quite some time. But how do we actually shift that perspective to say, hey, it's something that we can do help you right now? Next thing that we need is a very strong foundation. So moving down the strategic arrow down here, that's a foundation. And there's several pieces that we need to get into, but I'll just leave that there for now. We need to build something solid. I think it's about 60% of businesses still, or only about 60% of businesses actually have a website today. And if you think about it from the perspective of, that's pretty darn low, right? It's no longer a barrier to entry. Like, let's be completely honest, but is it something that you need, and is it something that you can actually use and leverage? And most businesses are in about that 40% range where you're leveraging digital not very effectively. And the businesses that are, which I'll get into shortly, those are the ones that are able to make that quick pivot, that quick shift, and they've built up a very strong digital foundation beyond just a website, beyond just a Facebook page, right? Those again are no longer entry points; those are must-have. And then finally, we get into that zone of foresight. If we want to grow, we have to look forward. We have to decide, okay, what's going to be important coming up? How are we going to actually do that? And that sort of thing. Lastly, what we need to look at is outcomes. So first thing in the zone right now, zone 1 of fear, is that state that we're in right now, is the signals. What is your audience telling you, right? What are they not telling you as well? And is there a gap between those two? So we need to look at how can we actually understand what the customer is saying, what our audience is telling us, and how can we actually then adapt to that as well. So we have to be good at reading messages. We have to be good at reading, between the lines type things, so that we can see how it all fits together and what we need to do to be able to adjust and that sort of thing. The next stage, zone 2, in terms of outcomes, is having enablers, right? And in that case, that means just having those abilities to implement. So your customer wants this, your customer wants digital delivery, your customer wants a personalized experience. How do you actually do that? And again, I'll show you that very quickly. And then the last one is the outcomes. And this is what I talked to you about Facebook and having a website. Right now, most businesses are about in that 40% range where they've got a way to go. We need to get most businesses up to that 80 to 90% of digital assets so that they can survive these types of things, whether they come again next year or whether this continues or whether, it doesn't happen for another 10 years. But again, whether it's pandemic, look, nobody's experienced that, or whether it's a recession, which a lot of us have experienced over the years, we still need to be very understanding of how do we put these pieces in place as well. All right, so moving on. This is just a summary of what those zones actually do, and I've basically already talked about that, so I won't go through that again. So moving forward, what we need to look at is what I call the point of certainty. So what's really important here, there's these 4 methods that are really specific to what is important in digital and how you can market through the crisis. We need to look at our audience, we need to look at our method, we need to look at our process, and we need to look at our story. And once we have all those pieces in place, this is what I call the point of certainty, okay? And this is the point of what I call clarity. And then this is the point of competency. So we have to understand what we're doing. We have to be able to deliver that, and we have to give that certainty, because that's what our customers are really looking for at this point. They may not need all the bells and whistles. They may not need the fanciest tech or the fanciest features. What do they want? They want certainty, right? They want certainty that if they spend money with you, you're going to be able to provide that certainty to help them through whatever it is that they're going through. And a lot of us are going through the same thing as well. Now, I'm going to go through process because that's sort of one of the specific elements here that can really sort of kickstart things in terms of what you need to do now, because again, that's really important. That if you needed to build a foundation, a process is a good way to do that. So it basically, what steps are you going to take to deliver what you're doing? And in today's day and age, we've seen a lot of the shifting of the process to be able to say, these are the very specific things that we need going forward as well. Now, what's really important, I don't actually, if you can see, it's on my backboard because I talk about it a lot. But what we really wanted to look at is how can we actually build one of these triangles. Okay, so we're going to build this process triangle just so it kind of all makes sense and all sort of fits together for you. There's these other four as well that I'm happy to talk about those later, or if you want to get in touch with me later as well. But this is a starting point. This is a Kickstarter. So that's what we're going to be looking at as the process. Now, what is really super important, I'll see if I can type this in just very quickly. So the first one is value creation. Oops. Okay, so that's the peak here. How do we create value that actually delivers what our customer wants to see, what our audience is expecting from us, right? How do we actually do that? We need to define the brand value. We need to, deliver what surprises and delights our customer, our audience as well. So we have to make sure that we focus specifically on creating that value, because if we don't, guess what? They're going to be going somewhere else, somewhere who can provide that value, because without it, you really don't have much to go on as well. The second one is what I call digital delivery. All right. Now, this is very, very specific. And the businesses that we've seen, come out of this very quickly and sort of change that inflection point very, very quickly are the ones that are being able to do this. And this, what I mean by this is they're able to deliver anytime, any place. This is on demand. So if you think something like Uber, right, that's on demand. So can you take your product, your value, and this can be a service as well. We don't necessarily have to look at it just from a product perspective, but how do we deliver our product digitally? Anytime, any place. If you're a service-based business, guess what? You can do that through live streaming. You can do that through videos. You can do that through content. So really, it's nothing new. It's just how do we actually put sort of a prioritization on it? So if we're able to deliver digital on demand, guess what? That's sort of the crux that happened with this shift from Blockbuster to Netflix, right? We saw that. So take a look. How can you actually deliver on demand with your product or your service too? Again, a lot of it is creating, which I'll get into next, is creating this experience. Okay, and that's, and the important thing here is that it's a personalized experience. Okay, so without a personalized experience, guess what? You're just like everybody else out there. You're no different. You're not creating anything unique to your audience. You're basically saying that they're the same as everybody else there. And if you're delivering that message, people don't care. They're not going to hang around. So can you deliver a remarkable personalized experience that is worth remembering? And that's key there. It has to be worth remembering. Now, if you take all these pieces together, a couple of really cool examples that I've seen over here in Australia and elsewhere as well is the businesses that are, again, controlling that inflection point to saying, hey, I need to build this as my digital foundation. These are like some of the restaurants, right? Restaurants were hit extremely hard. The restaurants that are making it through this are the ones that decided, you know what, it's not just about the experience sitting down in a restaurant. We've kind of gone past that. But how can I deliver an experience to my to the people who attend to my restaurant at home? Well, you can do it through live streaming. You can do it through having celebrity chefs. You can do it through, even having the chef create a dish for you on a Zoom session. There's a cool company out of Canada that's doing this right now, very similarly to that, is that they're creating an experience online. So they're creating that digital delivery, they're creating the personalized experience, and they're helping the person, create that value. They're creating that meal with them through Zoom. Now, could we take this to the next level where, I don't know if you have HelloFresh in South Africa, but what it is here in Australia is basically you order the meals and they come with all the ingredients. So it's a box of ingredients and then you make it. It's not quite as simple where everything is like already made in the plastic packs and that sort of thing. You throw it in the microwave. This is actually fun because I've been using it for a while. But the fact is you get the ingredients and then you make the dish. Wouldn't it be exciting if you could actually do that and take that to the next level? You have Jamie Oliver or some other celebrity chef, or it doesn't have to be a celebrity, but you have somebody guiding you through this process. Master Chef, big show here in Australia and in North America as well. But what if you could really enhance that by creating the experience? So you're doing multiple things here. You're creating your value is there. People get to learn what you're doing. They get to learn it for themselves. You're delivering it digitally through a live stream, and you're creating a personalized experience. It's tied exactly to that product. Winemakers, some of them have sort of started to key into this as well. You can't go to a tasting, or could you go to a tasting in the Hunter Valley in Eastern Australia, or the Niagara region in Canada, or sorry, I don't know any of the wine regions in South Africa. You're probably going to shoot me for that, but I know there's some beautiful wine regions in South Africa as well. What if you could actually have an online tasting rather, with a sommelier who goes through the specific wines? But before that, you order the wines that you want to sample, and then you go through the process and get through and understand how the whole process fits together, so you can actually create a part of a personalized experience. So we really have to look at it in terms of, okay, I'm not just a product, I'm not just a service. How am I creating that value to my audience? How am I creating that online digital delivery on demand? And how am I creating that personalized experience? Even if you are like a retailer, for example, or a product-based business, you can still do this as well. You can guide people through that process of understanding how this fits together. And again, some of the companies that are really doing this well, they're showing them all the steps involved in making it or creating it, or understanding it or using it, or whatever the case may be. So you're creating that value. Today, there are many, many services out there that allow you to become basically an Uber. So you can tack on, a different package to your e-commerce site, where, guess what? It actually calls a delivery person to come get that package as soon as it's ready to ship. So you can have it within, a couple hours, whatever the case may be. So as a small business, you can compete with Amazon, right? You can compete with the big people, Uber Eats, because you're able to deliver that product to your customer. And again, obviously depends on where you are, but in a sort of a more of an urban area, you can do that. You have the tools to be able to do that, and you can create that personalized experience. That's so key. That's what people are craving. You hear about Zoom fatigue and that sort of thing, and it is kind of hard over time, but what people really are looking for is that personalized experience. Can you give that to them? They don't want to listen to someone like me just droning on. They want to have a connection. And if I'm showing you something very specific, how to use my product, or how to create it, or how to understand it, or draw it. Like there's a program coming up here in Australia where one of the TV announcers, he does a lot of different shows here, but it's actually going to be an art class. So he's going to be sketching, and everybody else can sketch at the same time through Zoom of the subject that they have. So can you imagine, that's such a cool and exciting experience as well. All right, so I want to keep moving here. Keep going on. So if you do have any questions, please ask, and we will get to them hopefully at the end of the day as well, or the end of the session. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was what I call the digital expedition, right? So if you look at it, I mean, I talked about those triangles before up here, right? And so we want to get to this point of certainty. Where to go? There we go. So just to refresh here. Okay, so we want to get to the point of certainty, right? What also is this? This is a mountain. And what is this mountain based on? This is your mountain of value. Okay, so we want to be able to create that for your audience. And this is what I call your digital experience, or sorry, your digital expedition. So we want to get to this point of certainty, right? And if you're planning a trip, what do you usually do? You start to look at, okay, well, what vehicle am I going to use? What, tools am I going to need? Am I going to need extra fuel? Am I going to need, food along the way, or, what equipment or what clothes or whatever the case may be? Guess what? We're in that stage nowadays where we have to plan ahead. We can't just sort of fly by the seat of our pants. We really have to make an effort to say, if I want to get to this point of certainty, there are very, very specific things that I need to do. So what do you need to do next? The first thing is you have to define, where are you right now? At this moment in time, taking the chaos matrix that I showed you earlier, where are you right now? And why is that important? Well, because if you know where you are now, you can really define how you're going to get to the next place. So I know it seems pretty obvious, but even if you're using something as simple as your GPS, guess what? It asks you, where are you now, right? Are you at this little blue dot that's pulsing, or are you somewhere else? So we need to find out where exactly we are right now. Number two, to get to this point, we need to know, how will we get there? Where are we going? Am I going to London from Johannesburg, or am I going to Perth to London, or Perth to Johannesburg, right? I mean, again, these things are pretty obvious, but sometimes we just don't actually do it. We don't decide that this is where we want to do. Where is our point of certainty? Where is your point of certainty? Where is it that you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And then we can look at, what teams, tools, and tactics do we need? If we start planning number 3 before number 1 or 2, guess what? We're not going to get there. If we decide, hey, we don't really know where we're going to go, guess what? We're not going to get there. And if we don't really define where we are right now, we're not going to get there. So from a marketing perspective, we really have to go through these steps. They are very specific, but they are very precise in terms of, how does that give you direction for your audience, for your customers, as you market to them. And this is actually what I call the digital expedition. But who's leading that digital expedition? It's what I call the new CEO of the 2020s, right? The Chief Expedition Officer. So, we can use the term loosely, but what we're talking about is business leaders rather. So can we actually prepare ourselves to fulfill that role of being the Chief Expedition Officer, so that we can get to our point of certainty, so that we can get, across to where we want? And guess what? We're already sitting a lot on our mountain of value, but we need to be very specific. How are we hiking up this hill, right? Are you prepared for it? Are you ready for it? Do you know what's coming? Are you understanding, again, where you are right now? And if you do, then you'll be able to move forward. And if not, again, you'll have some progress. You'll have some levels of success. If I can go back to this one here. You will have some levels of success. Do something, right? Let's try it. Do nothing. Okay, we know where that inflection point is going to lead us. And then if we're doing strategic, the areas that I talked about, that's going to get you the distance that you want to. If you do want to find out exactly where you are, you can head to leadership.digital. That actually assesses a lot of your digital capabilities in terms of what's important now: strategy, content, campaigns, website, analytics, advertising, that sort of thing. So you can actually measure that as well. And that really comes to the conclusion in terms of what it is you want to do. So if you do want to reach out, happy to answer any questions as well. My name is Doyle Buehler, and you can Google me or just at Doyle Buehler for most social channels as well.
Absolutely outstanding, Doyle. I'm so impressed that you developed this whole strategy and your clarity chart out of our first hour's session You were obviously listening to our discussion as to where we're going, and you just quickly formulated this little chart. I mean, it was spot on in terms of our discussion that we were having early this morning as to, okay, where are we now? And where do we want to go to? And I think you've just clarified every single one of those steps. So very excited. I wonder, Doyle, do you need to have this share screen up, or can we open it up just to see who's keen to come on board? And if you're keen to come on board, please just start your video so that we can see you, and maybe you can put your hand up because I'm blind as anything. I can't see anyone putting their hand up. Ivan will help me out if he sees someone. Is it Donovan? I think you've opened up your mic. Donovan, would you like to come aboard and ask a question? Or did he disappear?
No, I don't think he's with us at the moment, Trev.
All right, Doyle. You know, I'm absolutely fascinated how you are spot on trend as far as I'm concerned, as to what is required to actually overcome this crisis right now. Give us a little bit of background, Doyle. How long have you actually been working on this model? Because it is a critical model. How long have you been in the game? And where have you inputted before this crisis? And I would think that this crisis actually creates a huge opportunity for you right now. But give us some of your history as to when you began in the digital consulting field, and who or what size of organization you've been working with in the past.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been in the online and e-commerce world since about 2002. Had one of the top 40 fastest growing companies in Canada back then, and we basically expanded around the world. So that was sort of my first taste of marketing in the e-commerce world. And I mean, it was sort of the whole business side of things, but marketing is marketing. It doesn't really matter what sort of the business is. But then in about 2010, when I moved to Australia, I worked with a lot of Fortune 100, 200, 400 type ad agencies, and really got an inside look in terms of, okay, well, what's really important for businesses in marketing, and how do we actually reach out? And I found that there was a lot of waste, a lot of inefficiencies, and a lot of stuff that really didn't make sense for a lot of businesses, because let's be honest, digital as it is before this was chaotic and confusing and that sort of thing. So it's really been my mission to say, how do we actually clarify the pieces of digital that are important? How do we actually understand how to use that? And it comes down to a concept that I talk a lot about called developing your digital genius, which is basically just you don't have to be like a Facebook ads expert or a SEO expert or whatever, right? But as the CEO, as the leader, as again your chief expedition officer, you really kind of need to understand these pieces. And that's where a lot of the wastage was that the leadership didn't necessarily fully comprehend how the pieces fit together. And to me, if I can help businesses sort of fit those pieces together, then that's key to sort of building your digital empire. We don't have a choice. If you want to exist in business today and going forward, you have to have that digital foundation. And so the businesses, again, some of the ones that I mentioned, they're making it because they decided that, guess what, people can't come to my restaurant, people can't come to my venue, people can't do this anymore. How do we actually decide how to change that? So personally, I went through this journey as well, the one that I showed you, in terms of, okay, my marketing message has to change. It's no longer just sort of the traditional marketing of, build a campaign and people will come to your web page or your Facebook page or whatever the case may be. We really had to shift in terms of an understanding of, how do we get through this? What's really key here? And so I, built the story of saying, look, this is an expedition for us as businesses today, because it is tough and it's going to get tougher. But you know what they say, the strong survive. So if you want to be able to put these pieces together, you got to put on your chief expedition officer hat and you have to pull these pieces out, or the 20x hat, Trevor. You have to be able to pull these pieces out and know exactly how they fit. So then if you're a solopreneur, cool, great, that's fantastic. You know the steps that you need to be able to do. Can you, again, create the value? Can you deliver digital, and can you sort of create the personalized experience? If you can build that as your starting point for your foundation, everything becomes a little bit easier. And then you add another block, and let's go, happy to go through those other blocks as well if you want. But that's the key ingredient here, is that we need to change the way that we're doing things. Not necessarily in a frantic, frenetic pace that, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that, because that's where, a lot of the trouble comes from, is that we don't really decide what we want to do. But take some breathing room, take an understanding of what's really important here. How do I put these pieces together? And then we can build upon that. We have to be smart about going forward. We keep doing the same thing. Guess what? You might be successful, but you might not. So if you want to sort of reduce that level of failure, then we need to sort of have a plan in place. And that was the plan that I said. And I've talked a lot about this in the last 4 or 5 months. Is that this is how we need to see things going forward. It's no different than, when the early explorers, like the big expeditions of the past, like, guess what? They had a comfy place. I mean, even if you go back hundreds of years, right? Their bases were pretty comfy, but when they went out to explore Antarctica or the Canadian North, or, across the Atlantic, or, through the Asian archipelagos. Yes, that's it. These are expeditions, the first flight around the world, the first flight across the Atlantic. Like, guess what? If they weren't prepared, they died. And I'm not saying it's as severe as that now, but, what do you need to do to equip your team or yourself as the business owner to be able to get there?
So Doyle, let me tell you, I want Ivan to send a message out to all the next speakers. I want to cancel the whole lot of them. I just want to listen to the remainder of the chapters that are due to come here. Otherwise, we've got to do a series here. But I wore my 20 expedition hat here for you. You got the idea. 20 expedition. I knew you were going to talk about this. If you buy that, you will buy anything from a South African. There were a couple of people.
Yeah, we've got a question.
Yeah, I saw they unmiked themselves. One was Becky and one was Kevin Northern. So in case they want to come on board, I'm going to go to Becky. You seem to have a question here that you'd like to pose to Doyle. Becky, go ahead.
Yeah, Trevor, I think she's put it in the chat box, so maybe we can
just... I see the question. Yeah. I can just answer from the question unless you want to ask it. But yeah, I'm selling this product in the rural area where it's needed for my customer to use my online tools or even website app. PayPal is a serious challenge. Firstly, because data is not cheap in South Africa, not even in African countries. Data is a problem. Yes, there's not an easy solution for that. Australia just recently introduced what they call the National Broadband Network, which is broadband across the country. It's fiber to offices and buildings. Mind you, now it's not fiber right to the box kind of thing. Look, I mean, that's a technical challenge. I don't know exactly where you are or, how that fits together, but you need to have that data. The other thing you can potentially look at is maybe have a remote center. So who can you partner with in a more, in a location that might have better internet or better internet capabilities as well. So most people are pretty flexible and pretty able to connect and that sort of thing. So maybe that's something for your network. It's like, I need somebody to manage this type of process remotely. Because there are, on that thread, there are a lot of people who do work remotely as well. So it's not just you, somewhere in the rural area, there's other people doing that or other people that you can actually get to help. So that's what I would suggest. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it makes me think that perhaps government needs to take note of the Clarity Chart because now is the perfect opportunity to be doing something on a national basis when it comes to data.
Yeah, no, for sure. Some place like Canada it was quite interesting. They did the transition to broadband a lot different than Australia. So I was a little bit surprised because they had the cable TV, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So when the internet came, they just basically pushed it through the cable TV connections across the country, which seemed to work a lot better. But in Australia, they actually didn't have that, so they couldn't use it. But nowadays, you do have not necessarily satellite, that's very expensive, but you do have sort of aerial Wi-Fi. There's a couple in Australia, and there's one in Canada, a fellow I know in Winnipeg that actually has that for rural areas where it's broadcast to towers, and then the towers broadcast on Wi-Fi. So that can certainly be used as well. But yeah, look at how can you connect with a partner that might be in a place that has better internet than you, and just, you know, create that communication channel.
Kevin Northern, I did see you unmute and then quickly muted again. Are you wanting to come on board and ask a question? Please do. There you go.
Not really. It was just finger trouble, but you know, I'd like to thank Doyle for this anyway. It's been excellent, and I think it was a job well.
I'm pleased that it's finger trouble. What have you got out of the presentation so far that actually strikes you? What line of business are you in, Kevin?
In the payment space. We do systems for big banks and insurance companies and government and things like that. But I'm trying to develop an online business as a secondary thing, just been too busy to attend to it. So this structure and setup that Doyle has presented is really excellent to help get your head in the right space.
Absolutely. So I can see where the affinity comes between you and Doyle right now. And I'd love you two guys to actually connect. Because we'd love to see a connection come out of this virtual Trade Fair.africa, where no one actually knew each other and came on board, and suddenly something big came out of this. I mean, just listening to your background, history, and career, where you come from, Doyle would love to have an understanding of that and to see how we can collaborate continent to continent on projects. I'm sure. Doyle, yes?
Yeah,
Please.
absolutely. And
Yep.
100%. I think that that's super important, is being able to do that, is being able to connect. We don't have to necessarily have a business that's just around the corner to us. We can have a business that, you know, has partnerships around the world. And to me,
Yep.
that's a fantastic capability of what we have today. So we need to kind of continue that.
I'm sure I know this name, Kevin Northern, and I think there's an important reason to actually connect with him. Please put your details in the chat facility. Anyone that needs to connect with Doyle, I think this is a really important collaboration that we've got to get into. Doyle, if there's no one else, and Ivan, if you can't point to me, I've got another question for Doyle.
Trevor, I think Donovan might be wanting to. Donovan, were you wanting to
go for it?
Donovan, are you with us? Are you wanting to comment?
If I may, while Donovan's getting ready, one of the things that's really important is that we've been talking about tech, and I think that was part of the conversation before this as well, is that the tech doesn't always work. And you have to understand that that's a potential, but you have to have a workaround. Like in my case, I had my sticky notes. Hopefully you could see them okay, because I couldn't see myself in the sticky note, but that was my backup. I've done live streams where the whole thing collapsed. You press the live button and everything collapses, right? And it just stops. And so what do you do? So the expectation has to be, yes, the tech is great, but guess what? You have to be prepared for it not to work. And what's your plan after? So don't panic, fix it. You can adjust it. You can move, you can do something different. You can try a different channel, you try different network, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, very important.
Absolutely. Donovan, are you able to unmute yourself there? You're going to have to get your new Paris. There he is. Yep.
We're still not hearing you, Donovan. We're not hearing you at all. No,
okay. While he's there he comes.
Just to go over the presentation again.
Are we struggling?
Donovan, unfortunately, we're really struggling with your sound again this morning. I'm not too sure what's happening there. Can you maybe just type your comment into the chat box and Doyle can pick it up from there?
Or if you have like your phone.
Yep. And Donovan, what I'm curious about, Donovan, is you know, what took you from Canada to Australia? You were talking about top 40 companies and all of these sort of things, and then you go to Australia, and in fact you go to the I think it's the 11th province or 13th province of South Africa in Perth at the moment. So you've probably got so many of our South African rugby players there that can teach you how to play rugby. What took you there, for goodness sake?
Well, I was actually expanding my business around the world. So we had licensed. This was for basically skins for the back of laptops and portable devices and that sort of thing. So we had licensed it into the U.S. and then into Europe and then into Australia. And while I was developing the licensee arrangement, I came to Australia. And I used to live in Winnipeg, and I don't know if you know where Winnipeg, Canada is, but it's like right in the middle. And it's minus 40 in the winter, right? And it's like, no, I don't need any more of this. So I decided to stay, and I've obviously since met my wife, and we've been, living between Perth and Sydney over the years, but in the last 5 years, mostly in Perth. So yeah, so that's how I got here, and that's why I'm staying here. So I don't miss the Canadian winters at all.
And Doyle and Ivan, please interrupt me whenever you see someone that really needs to get a question in there. But Doyle, again, curiosity says to me, man, you know this field so well. And this seems to me to be, in the old days, they talked of the information superhighway. I think we are now on Elon Musk moonshotting to Mars sort of scenario, and we might be bypassing each other in space. So where's your head? Where's the big money for Doyle Buehler and his close network over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years?
I guess from my perspective, it's showing people how they can actually do this. So it ties in terms of that digital genius. So what are the tools? What are the pieces that you need to be able to understand how to build a digital foundation, how to understand how to build, your digital assets, your ecosystem, all that kind of stuff. So that's really important to be able to do that. Again, this is the CEO of the 2020s. You need to have this, otherwise you'll struggle. So how do we actually create that? It's through education and training and workshops and that sort of thing that I do. We also do like full on, campaigns and advertising campaigns and that sort of thing for very specific products or services or whatever the case may be. But they're not created in isolation, and that's something really that's very important. A lot of businesses try Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever the case may be, but it's just they run it sort of in isolation. So what's really important is being able to say, hey, how are we actually building this as part of our foundation, part of our digital assets, part of our ecosystem, and how do we kind of continue that journey and tell that story? So that's really the focus is, number one is educating people, informing them, showing them how to do this so that they can then build their business to where they want it to go. Or we actually design specific campaigns to say, this is, something that we run for a specific time period to get leads, to get sales, to set up e-commerce, or, set up some of those experience type aspects that we added that I talked about earlier as well. So it's really important, to be able to have these and to be able to use them too. Put them in the toolbox that you have and grow that toolbox, but know how to use them as well. Because if you don't, guess what? You're going to miss out. You're going to see opportunities pass you by because you weren't able to engage in that. And now it's very, it's very decisive that, look, if you've been sitting around doing nothing, fearful of what to do, take some of these steps and actually use them and do something with them, because that gives you that foundation and that confidence to say, hey, it's not that hard, right? Yeah, it might be a little bit complicated, but you know what? Break it down into something simple. I call them power triangles for a reason, right? We've got 3 aspects on them, and I like to use those in terms of how you actually break a problem down. Break it down into 3 aspects. How do you attack it? A lot easier than going, I really don't know where to start. So.
Now, I was talking on another Zoom platform, and I know that you want to bridge between this presentation and the next one, Ivan, but I'm just going to say to Doyle, I was talking on the next platform about cometh the hour, cometh the man, and I think in terms of this crisis, Doyle, you could be the man. I almost feel as though you're talking to us. because we've recognized the depth of the problem that has happened for all businesses since the beginning of lockdown. And I think that's on a global scale. And all of a sudden, something that came out of nowhere, this virtual Trade Fair.africa, we've just seen how it has global potential. And we've got to be tapped into each other here in a big way to see how we can actually support each other's travels around the world as 20 expedition, chief expedition officers all around the world. So I'm going to wrap it up there.
Thanks, Trevor.
Doyle, the most fascinating insights that you have given us here. If people are not impressed with what they've heard in this hour, well, you know what, you may as well go and jump off the single little brick that you're standing on, because I don't want you to go crazy there. What you have given is people is hope in where to position their businesses in the future. Yes, and I see you've got an applause coming in. Dawn, you can go and dip your hand in that yellow bucket again. It's quite simple, and you get it up there. So well done, Doyle. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm going to